For reaction to the Matric results, I'm now joined by education activist Hendrick Makaneta. Hendrick, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Thank you very much indeed, Simpiwe.
Well, the class of 2021 certainly broke a new record and showered with all sorts of praises. So what do you think motivated them to push the envelope a little bit further and reach for the stars, despite enduring 2 consecutive years of harsh exposure to the unrelenting COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, Simpiwe, it should be very clear at this point that the class of 2021, unlike the class of 2020, had enough time to navigate and understand the terrain of COVID-19. You'll remember that this is the class that was doing grade 11 in 2020. And at some point, they stayed at home without any tuition. But in 2021, all of them were at school. There was not a single moment where schools were closed, unlike the class of 2020. And of course, if you look at the whole issue of a rotational timetable, it did not affect the grade 12 learners at all. That timetable only affected the lower grades. So I can say that for grade 12, the class of 2021, it was business as usual despite the challenges of COVID-19. And of course, one of the other key factors was the limited number of classes. You'll remember that most classes were reduced. So teachers were able to focus thoroughly on each and every learner because of the lower number of learners inside the classroom. And this happened simply not only in private schools, but also in public schools. And I think that it is for this reason that we need to applaud the class of 2021 for taking the time and the trouble to put an extra effort as well. And indeed, we saw for ourselves, as the minister announced, that there are more bachelors acceptance into universities than ever before.
Mr. Makaneta, you mentioned the issue of, the contentious issue, as it were, of rotational learning. Does it not give oxygen to talks that it should go on, despite, some quarters saying that it should be scrapped?
Well, I think simply at this point, we all agree that our learners need to go back to class on a full-time basis, particularly the grade 11s downwards. We know that, they've already lost a lot in as far as the coverage of the curriculum is concerned. But of course, this has to be done in line with the law. We cannot just do it haphazardly. That is why the minister announced at some point that they will have to wait for the National Coronavirus Command Council to give a green light. But also the issue of the reduction of social distancing from 1 meter to 0.5 meter. Those are some of the proposals that the minister made. And we hope that at some point, our view as activists in the terrain is that perhaps let us just allow the learners to proceed with this rotational timetable for the first term of 2022. And in the second term of the year, we can proceed with a full-scale, full-blown attendance of learners.
The matric pass rate is often criticized as being an untrue representation of the actual pass rate by the learners who enter the education system in grade 1 versus those who leave or eventually pass matric. So what are your thoughts on this supposedly inaccurate reflection?
Yes, definitely, Simpiwe. If you check, there are many factors that affect the dropout rates in the system. It is true that when learners enter the system at grade 1 level, only 50% of them exit the system in matric. And this is caused by, amongst others, the high rate of teenage pregnancy, but also issues of drug abuse, issues of gangs in communities, issues of poverty generally, as well as inequality. Because if you can look at schools that are found in poor communities, that is where you find that dropout rates are high. But at the same time, you will also remember that when learners began with this issue of rotational timetable, some of the learners in the process also lost interest because a learner will go into school, for example, on a Monday and attend a lesson, only to come back on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And by the time the learners come back, they have already forgotten what was taught in the previous lesson. And I think that in a sense, some of them, if you look at those in grade 11, some of them ended up finding employment as well in the process because they were not attending for all the days as demanded by the CAPS curriculum. So basically, this actually leads to dropout rates, or it has exacerbated the dropout rates, which were already there, by the way, long even before COVID-19. And I think that it is for this reason that we need to encourage the minister to continue to fight the dropout rates to make sure that it comes to an end. And of course, the other issue is the new bill that is in place. For instance, if a learner is not at school, in terms of the proposed bill, the principal has got a duty to contact the parents within 24 hours if a learner is not at school within 3 days, to alert the parents. Right now, this has not been happening. That is why you'd find that some of the learners will not be at school for a week or even more, and nothing was happening. So in terms of the new law, follow-up will have to be made. And I think that in future, we may be able to defeat these dropout rates that we experience in the system.
Would you take into cognizance such socio-economic factors as the lack of nutrition, as the lack of social interaction and organized play in early development years, as a foundation for this argument of inaccurate reflection of the matric pass rate?
Yes, definitely. Simply a foundation, we've always made a call to the minister to say that the foundation is very important. I'm sure you'll agree with me that when you build a house, the stronger the foundation, the stronger your house will be.
Yes.
But now in the basic terrain of education, you find that there is not a lot of emphasis at foundation phase level. That's why, for instance, you find that anybody can teach. There is this notion that at foundation level, anyone can teach there, even those teachers who don't really have the necessary qualifications. So I think the Department of Basic Education must zoom into foundation in order to strengthen it. Remember that at some point a research was made where it was found that grade 4 and 5 learners are unable to read for meaning.
Right.
And that has actually affected the terrain. But at the same time, you'll recall Simpiwe, South Africa participated in the international studies, the so-called TIMSS, Trends in International Mathematics and Science Studies. That too has shown that we are lagging behind because South Africa came out last from the 50 countries that participated in the study. And that actually means we need to strengthen our foundation phase so that we can have a proper, a pool of graduates who will leave a matric 12 years later and be able to make a meaningful contribution towards the economy of our country.
Okay, Mr. Makaneta, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much indeed.